Anyone working within classical culture obviously want to remedy the situation as it is today. But I can tell you right from the get-go, equality is not the way to go. Equality Check have investigated into the museums and the foundations in Norway, how equal is Norway's art, and you see here on the video how the museums would look like if the works by men were taken away. So they're making the point that 90% of the works in museums and foundations are made by men, and they want to remedy that. It's time we ensure that the art collections of the future are representative of our time. So they're saying that what happened in the past was unjust, so they want to remedy that with making the collections of today unjust. We'll get to how that works. So the thing is, after investigating into the collections around this country, they made this pledge that they want art collectors in any shape and form to sign. So you have to then pledge that 50% of your purchases will be by female artists from 2021 onwards, and that your exhibition program also will then be concerned with a gender equality perspective, with 50% women from 2021, and then that they should prepare a plan, and this is where when it gets kind of sneaky. Prepare a concrete plan to improve gender balance, cultural diversity, and equality in the context of gatherings and exhibitions to ensure future representativeness and timeliness for the entire population. So this is where it suddenly goes from just equality in when it comes to women and becomes something that encompasses any group that might be fit comfortably into the victim hierarchy. And in short, we are talking about social justice. We're talking about critical theory, and I think this is something that has this has been a huge discussion last year, and we'll get to that now because there's someone I really want to introduce to you. Before we do that, head over to caveofapellis.com/donate and check out the different ways you can support our show and the benefits you get from doing so. So the man I want to introduce to you is this guy. His name is Danby Choi. He has written an article referring to Equality Check and their pledge that they want people to sign. Equality in art, do not sign the pledge. And this is really a guy I'm starting to like more and more. He is the editor of Subjekt magazine in Norwegian. He is and this is the magazine that gave a prize, the Reader's Prize, to the 5 students that objected to the introduction of critical theory at the National Academy of the Arts, and they were quite severely treated by the school and other students because of that. So this is the man behind that magazine, firmly placed on the left, and it's really a great thing to see that people who are objecting to this are not only coming from the right. So let's get to some bullet points here, because it's saying some really good things here. First off, is talking about how that the last 5 years, when it comes to the balance between the sexes, there's more or less total equality. And he says we achieved that without authoritarian demands superimposed on what he calls the free art field. And in spite of that, Equality Check wants to use authoritarian means and take away the museum's artistic integrity and freedom. And they want to have a schematic balance between the sexes through a militant. They want to create a militant and schematic balance between the sexes. So, and then he goes on to say that there's some problems that arise quite quickly. For example, the National Museum in Norway, they've already, and this is October 2020, they've already bought, I think it's like 75% works of women the last 5 years. And then he's saying, well, should they then, discriminate against buying women now so that women will not have more than 50%? And of course, that's a rhetorical question, because that will not happen. But then he's because of the politics of it. But then he's saying something which is really this is where we're starting to talk about some serious consequences. There are good reason to fear those who want museums, foundations, and private art collectors to march lockstep. Let that sink in. I'm, of course, speaking from the vantage point of a classical figurative painter, a kitsch painter, but I'm thinking also of sculptors, and of course also in the broader context, tonal composers, novelists or whatever. But in this specific case, private collectors. You are a classical figurative painter. There are already a massive push for figurative painting to follow the ideas of art, reflecting your time. I remember meeting some quite rich people once. They had erected their own private scholarship, and it was for figurative painting that reflected its time. They thought that was very important. So the problem is that private art collectors, they follow what the big museums do. So there's this art industrial complex, this situation where what the public museums do, the state institutions do, will affect what the private institutions do and do as well. Private collectors do as well. So this will have some really quite devastating effects if this really develops. So Dan Bichoy is protesting against this, and is saying that when you deviate from talking about the quality of the actual work, then you're on the wrong path, because then you get into all kinds of aspects of identity politics, and he's saying that are we risking that the museums will go from what they call unconscious discrimination? This is a key term in critical theory, unconscious bias. You think you're being fair, but in reality, you're being extremely unfair and bigoted. You just don't know it. And the fact that you think you are not bigoted is proof that you are. So you get into a impossible situation. The only solution, if you want to appeal to the social milieu, is to just bow to what is going on here. And this is what is so dangerous about this push for more equality, because it will be an equal outcome. So you accept this thing about equality. Well, then what about all the other minorities, immigrants, and overweights, blinds, people with disabilities, whatever. And in the end, you're sitting there with an equation that doesn't match up. And what is sacrificed on the altar of social justice is looking at the actual work itself. And that is, from before, a huge problem. I remember going to Rotterdam together with Odd Nerdrum and some others. We were going to see a Rembrandt painting, but Rembrandt Research Project had taken it away from Rembrandt, and then it wasn't there anymore. So the wonderful, amazing masterpiece wasn't a masterpiece anymore, because the signature was false or not accepted. So there are, as it is, people who think in the art mindset are unable to see, this Kantian thing in itself. They think it's something abstract. They don't understand that it is the actual painting they're looking at, to be able to see the quality of it. And the art ideas that craft is out, that you shall only reflect your time, and that you shall express yourself, all these things are already taking them away from actually looking at the quality of the work. And this push for social justice will go only further in that direction. And Choi is at the end there saying, are there any brave voices to take this discussion within the art field, or will they keep their mouths shut in fear of being harassed by the political correct people? Of course, I think that is more than a rhetorical question. Well, I guess that is the rhetorical question, because it's saying that will, of course, happen. Now, this has been a long discussion, and these two women, Sarah Torjussen and Victoria Steinland, they've written an article entitled "Is Only Men's Art of Quality?" And then they are referring to Choi, this magazine, saying that to suggest that equality leads to quotas of mediocre art is an expression for exactly for those attitudes we have to fight by actively being for equality. So we're already getting the problem here then, that when you think from a classical standpoint, what is made within the idea of fine art is bad, of course. That's the whole point, that craft is out of the question. So the whole discussion becomes quite absurd in any case. But let's go to check out what they're saying here, and it seems, to be fair, it seems fair because they're saying that there's an historical I almost said queerness because it's sort of slightly off, the balance between the sexes, and they want to remedy that, to focus on female painters, whatever, that have not been recognized, and that's fine. From a meritocratic viewpoint, if a person is skilled, the sex or color of skin, blah, 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 all that doesn't matter. But there's something else behind here, and we'll get to that, because they are representing an organization called The Art of Balance, and I'll read you some quotes from there after going through some points here. So what they're saying is seems fair, that women have been overlooked, and they want to remedy that, and so that it's not a question of saying that the male artists of today shall pay for what has happened in the past, that you cannot change the past, but you can influence the future, and that's fine, but that's quite a general statement. So where it gets problematic is when you go to The Art of Balance, and you can see there's an English banner here as well, if you want to check out what I'm saying here, and they are talking about then that they have a broader idea of what plurality is, and this is where it gets from sort of old school feminism into a situation where intersectionality takes over, where it's about justice for all kinds of aspects, color of skin, background, sexuality, all these things goes into sort of a higher level here. So they're saying here that the Art of Balance are basing themselves on a broad idea of plurality when they're working for equality, and they are they want equality and plurality. When it comes to sex, your sex, your gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, when it comes to disabilities, age, class, background. So they sort of cover all the things there. And again, seems fair. Then it gets a bit more problematic. The Art of Balance also has an active and critical attitude to the idea of or the term plurality, to ensure that its understanding is kept relevant to all that are exposed of discrimination in or kept out of the cultural life. So this is something that keeps never goes out of fashion, because you can always add some kind of group that has been badly treated. And it's also a question of what counts as being badly treated. So and that's where you can add, the thing at the bottom here, which explains that in a bit more detail and why I think this is problematic. And they want to break down barriers that may create, unfreedom is the Norwegian term, lack of freedom for certain groups, which may, for example, be a lack of accessibility and inclusion, reproductions of norms and hierarchies, discrimination, harassment, hate speech, and hate crime. And so there are two things here. From the perspective of someone who works with sort of the Greco-Roman mentality, and then I'm thinking about Baroque painting, I'm thinking about Renaissance sculpture, I'm thinking about academic painting, I'm thinking about things from ancient Greece. Okay, so reproductions of norms of hierarchies. This is when we need to remind ourselves to read this book, Cynical Theories by Helen Pluckrose and James Lindsay, because then you understand, like Lindsay is talking about, one thing is what is outside, on the box, and then there's what's inside the box, and that doesn't necessarily match. So this whole idea of critical theory as it develops, you're talking about critical race theory, talking about colonial studies, queerness and all these things. The very basis of it is that there's no such thing as objective knowledge. That was just happened to be defined by a group of Eurocentric white men who were in power and had the power to decide that this should be objective. But then there are all kinds of knowledges, and you access those knowledges through your emotions. Now, this is sounding pretty much like what we've been experiencing for at least 120, 30 years within the field of art. This is why Munch says, they can't understand that to me the sky can appear green. This is breaking down norms. Norms in painting is that you have certain objective criteria for what is, proportions, color, a variation in paint, etc. And the other thing is the breaking down of hierarchies, where someone who is extremely skilled, some Rubens guy who can, just throw out a lot of figures on a canvas, is no more skilled than someone who paints just black on a canvas. So the whole idea of critical theory wants to break down all established criteria, all established hierarchies, all established ways of judging quality. And this is where we get to the heart of the matter. When you already are going away from that in art, and then you get critical theory pushing it further in that direction, if you are working within classical culture, somehow this will only increase or make the situation worse and worse and worse. And of course, there's these terms, hate crime and hate speech, which are also extremely malleable and where you can fit almost anything into it. And I think if we go to this this part also, this is also from The Art of Balance, where they're saying then that, well, now it's time to stop discussing whether the lack of equality and plurality in art and culture is a problem. And then they go back and forth between, things that sound totally crazy and things that sound reasonable. Because they're saying that if you get equality, then you get greater freedom for all, and you get more plurality, and that's, makes a richer cultural life. But then they're ending it again with something that doesn't go in the way direction of classical culture in any shape, way, or form, where they say that they are working to put art and culture in a societal connection, that the art shall be free, that it cannot be, that art shall be free doesn't mean that that it doesn't have a responsibility for, in society, which means engaging in society. And if you go back to this to equality check, you see here that representative of our time is the goal here. So we know that this will not benefit classical culture at all. So the thing is that and I think maybe the thing is that there's another term. There's another term that they use, and this is the idea of false consciousness. So imagine that you are a woman and that you're working within classical culture, whether you identify as a kitsch painter or not. What we see here rather is Anne Herrero, and she is an amazing painter. She's working with some larger scale compositions now. What happens is that they will of course not buy anything of Anne Herrero, and they will also not buy anything by Colleen Barry, another amazing female painter, because we are talking about a situation where if you work with something that in any way appears to be so-called old-fashioned, that is a part of the so-called Eurocentric way of thinking about painting. Never mind the Nigerian sculptures from the 16th century or the Japanese from the 8th century. If you are working within this form, then the critical theory mindset, the social justice mindset, says that you have internalized the male gaze, and that you have then a false consciousness. So you are betraying your identity group. And that's what I'm saying. We all want to improve the situation, but we must not be fooled by these ideas of justice, of fairness, because this is what you call newspeak. So to sum up here, there's so much to get into. I mean, the one thing is this whole idea of, this type of painting is based on the idea that you have objective measurements. You can see the proportions, that they are correct. You can check out that the colors are, if she's completely purple in the face, then that's wrong. There's certain criteria then that you can go by, but that is specifically what critical theory, social justice attacks, that there is any kind of objectivity at all. So what we have to understand here, the value system of art has at its very basis this idea of a type of epistemology, the idea of how we acquire knowledge, that says we cannot know anything about reality, we cannot reach it. So of course painting it, emulating it somehow in the classical Greek way is absurd to that way of thinking. Then you get critical theory that says, that just drives that even further. There is no truth, there is no objectivity, other than that certain groups are victims and that another group has to pay for that, the rest of their lives. So what we need to get back to, and this is why we're talking about having the conversations that we are having at the Cave of Apelles, is back to the idea of craft, of storytelling, of not having painting being obliged to the art rules. Check out the conversation that I had with Bork Nerdrum on The Invention of Art, Larry Shiner's book on what art is. Please read that book, because if we can at least get to the point where we agree that art was an 18th century invention, that radically broke with this kind of work, then we can start building something.